Hello and welcome to the Futurist Letters Show. My name is Cairo Smith. I am the founder and editor-in-chief of Futurist Letters, the journal. I am also the host of the Futurist Letters Show. Today, I am joined by my co-host, Kenny White. Hey, Kenny.
Hey, what's up, Cairo?
Glad to have you at my side here. And we are going to be venturing deep into the depths of the internet on this very special episode. So if you would like to sponsor the show, this is where your sponsor message will go. You can catch us with video on Substack and on YouTube. And you can also listen to this on Spotify or through RSS on Apple Podcasts or wherever else you listen to your RSS podcasts. So that said, this episode is free. If you would like to stick around for the after show episode, Kenny and I will just be reflecting on how it went, any other thoughts we had during the episode, and that is available to journal subscribers. So anyone who subscribes for just a few bucks a month gets access to all the behind-the-scenes notes from our authors on the journal, including myself, and also our after show episodes. So please do that. It's a really great, easy way to support what we do. That being said, I would like to let our guest for this episode introduce herself. She is Katherine Dee. You might know her. She is consistently top ranked or near top ranked on Substack for her work. She is an internet culture reporter. You can find her work all over the internet, and I will let you hear directly from Katherine who she is and what she does. So, Katherine, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. The after show sounds really interesting. I was like, I want to, I want to like. Do you guys gossip about your guests?
Lillian Solonic, after she came on, she said, "I figured out your scam. You just you have people on, and then you make them pay for a subscription so they can see what you say about them." I said, "Yeah, you figured it out, Lillian." So maybe that is the scam. I don't know.
It's really good.
Yeah,
uh,
but it's never anything bad about the guest. Of course, it's always just like, oh, did we put our foot in our mouth? But yeah.
Still, I mean,
So yeah, for those who might not know, who are you? What do you do? And how did you come to be doing this?
sure. I'm a blogger. I write about internet culture almost exclusively. I used to be like a gender wars person, and it wasn't me. um, I just felt like the absolute wrong person to be writing that kind of content. Um, I kind of fell into both things. I used to work in tech. So this is what happened. I worked in tech, and when I moved to the Bay Area, the guy I was seeing at the time was like, well, first of all, he loved like tech Twitter and he loved tech Twitter personalities. And then second of all, he was like, there's nothing to do here. It's so lonely, it's so boring. So I had an events newsletter, which is part of where I get my name Default Friend. Default Friend is like the friend you call when like no one who you really want to hang out with is available, right? So I had this events newsletter, and I was sort of um like a nano. I don't even want to say celebrity, but I was like kind of known in the startup community. I would do like dinners and stuff and take people to parties and whatever. And then COVID happened, and I started doing like uh, engagement bait, like dating takes. And I did all sorts of like projects related to this. I also say yes to pretty much everything. If someone invites me on a show or wants me to contribute to something or wants me to do matchmaking with them, which is what ended up happening. And so I was doing that for a while, and I was writing for any publication that would ask. And then over time, I developed my own voice and interests. And I shifted from doing these like dating takes to writing about internet subcultures. I had sort of been doing that in my professional life. Um, I wrote about like obscure subcultures that we might be able to advertise to when I was in tech. And I looked at different subcultures to see like what can we learn from them to make our advertising more interesting. And then I funneled that into this sort of like freelance anthropology, which is what I'm doing now. And I have columns. I have columns all over the place. I have a column in Tablet, the Dispatch, The Spectator. I'm a pretty regular contributor to Pirate Wires. I write for Unheard a few times a month, so I do a lot of stuff on top of my blog, which is default.blog. And I think that's I think that's a summary.
But, it's funny. There were all these words for socialites, columnists, women of letters in, I feel like, the late 19th century, and then we had this big sort of corporate media wave of, and these like very high flying, Vogue, splashy 6-figure salary writing jobs of the 20th century, and then obviously we had the sort of implosion of magazines, the death of that. And now it almost seems like we're sort of remaking what was, 150 years ago, as far as being a freelance writer and having these little presses. I don't know. Kenny, you've worked in tech, you've lived in the Bay. How does this all come off to you? Is it funny to sort of have this sort of I don't know, just running into people that you may have been a few feet from here and there in life?
Catherine's description of the social scene in the Bay Area definitely felt very spot on. I could have used a default friend, I'm sure, to help me.
You should have signed up for the newsletter.
I didn't even know about it. That's this thing, It's like there's just like layers and layers of access, and apparently I was a layer below. I think also I was in the crypto space, which in SF was somewhat. I felt like it was like kind of in a parallel track to the rest of the startup scene there, for better and for worse. But I definitely, San Francisco is interesting because on the one hand, I feel like it's written about a lot. People are always curious about the culture there and what's happening. But then when you get there, you feel like there's some sort of, I don't know, there's like both energy in the air, but also a lack of socializing going on. It's hard to really put into words the paradox of the San Francisco social scene.
Katherine, did you go to SF from somewhere else? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Florida, but I had been living in Texas, and then I moved to San Francisco for a job.
Mm.
Well, San Jose. I didn't even really live in San Francisco proper. I worked in Sunnyvale and I lived in San Jose, and my workplace had buses up to San Francisco, so I would take the bus from San Jose to Sunnyvale, which isn't that long. And then after work, like it felt like after school, like actually like this workplace felt like school. I would take the bus up to San Francisco and then, go do a bunch of stuff till late at night and then Uber back to San Jose, which is like kind of insane.
And you are now not anywhere near California, right? You're in Chicago? Is that right?
Yep, I'm in Chicago. I visit the Bay Area like quite often. I'm going again this weekend. And I was there weekend before last. And I was actually supposed to go this weekend, but my son fell and I felt guilty leaving him.
Oh, is he okay?
He's totally fine. He does have a black eye though, which is like he just tripped up the like some rubber stairs at a playground, and it like and he didn't even notice what happened. He was just like ready to get back playing, and I'm like, oh my god, you look like you just got beat up.
You all fell down the stairs. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's what playgrounds are for. They say, I don't know. I know it's like there's certain things like they think IBS is from not being exposed to enough dirt and germs. So you can get this like immune issue. Yeah. It's like, it's linked to like this like cleanliness, fastidiousness. At least I read that. Who knows? I don't know if I believe half the studies I read anymore.
I kind of believe that, but I've been thinking about that recently because there's all these like antibiotic resistant bacterias and like new bacterias that are, I mean, it's real, right? Like this, like
yeah.
The city will be like, so there's like at playgrounds there's splash pads. Which are like little fountains, and for people who don't have kids that are up off the ground, they're like playing in sprinklers. And what happens is like lots of toddlers will go play in those and like sit with their full diapers and stuff on it, and so they become like, just disgusting. But they'll become like these like hot spots for bacteria to spread, and a lot of these outbreaks are becoming like increasingly more dangerous. And
Hmm.
so it's not, I don't think it's like safety theater or anything. It's like pretty gnarly to get sick in this way. um but then
With
at the
these
same time,
antibiotic resistant bacteria.
yeah. um
Yeah.
and another place you could get them is like hospitals and stuff. But anyway, the point is, it's like a really tough negotiation between like, how do you not like, how do you balance not being too neurotic about cleanliness and then this like new very real threat, um that like didn't exist when I was a kid, at least not in the same way, and has become, it seems like it's becoming increasingly threatening as time goes by. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
like, it's tough because I kind of do buy the IBS thing.
I want to ask because, the internet is this strange place, and you've written a lot about ways to conceptualize the internet. I obviously started on the internet as a child, a teenager. You've interviewed a lot of people who spent their childhoods online. Did you spend your childhood online?
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm. And so you've gone from child to college student to young professional and now to young mother, with the internet as this sort of through line through all of it. And yet there are still new kids coming onto the internet every day, especially in these sort of weird extremist or underground subcultures. Do you how do you navigate the fact that the internet is still this place of kids and teens as you get older? Do you feel like your relationship with it changes?
Um, well, that's the thing. I don't I It felt much younger when I was younger, and I think that's
Mm,
partially like a perception thing because I was in spaces more geared towards young people. But now what I think is happening is there's a lot of age mixing that we don't really think about. Um, like like something that like will occur to me every now and then, and I actually like, I don't really know how to handle it. It's like there's a lot of teenagers who read my blog. It is not written to be appropriate for teenagers. um and I don't, when I'm writing, at least until like very recently, I haven't really been thinking about like, what, like, who are my readers and what am I exposing them to.
mm-hmm.
um and I think like that's kind of new at this scale. There's always been mixed ages, like I was talking to adults when I was 12, right? Which is whatever. Not what I'm doing, but like, this has been a problem since day one, is my point. But what's different is like the scale. Like millennials grew up online, but then they like never logged off. Like they're still online.
Yeah.
And same with the Zoomers. And there's more and more people on the internet, and as everyone's online, there's going to be like more sort of mixing, and there really aren't any spaces anymore that are like kids only and that are safe for kids. And that's where you get sort of like the real and imagined dangers of something like Roblox, where it'll be like, like one of the problems with Roblox, which is a mostly browser based like open world game,
Mm-hmm.
that's ostensibly for children, but really people of all ages play it. um, it's like you'll have like teenagers who are being sort of like developmentally appropriate edge lords, making like dick jokes or whatever. Like who
Sure,
cares if a
South Park-esque.
right. um, but there'll also be like an 8-year old where it's like, the dick joke is funny from a 15-year old, or at least appropriate to some extent, but like you don't want your 8-year old necessarily interacting with that. And then in that mix, um, every now and then, not as often as the media might make it seem, but often enough to be concerned as a parent, you have predators walking in who pose both a danger to the 15-year old making the sophomoric jokes and the 8-year old exposing themselves to jokes that are not developmentally appropriate. So there's a lot of problems that I think are intentional and unintentional.
Do you think the discourse around child predators, both online and off, has been completely subsumed into the culture war? Because
Not
I don't remember child predators being politicized as much when I was.
Are they
Um,
politicized now? Is there a right left take on child predators? I
Yeah.
thought we were all like against child predators, or is there like a different way of being against it now?
It can be politicized, like, um you know I mean, I don't know if this is, because I feel like growing up, if there was like a gay science teacher or something, right, there would be certain parents who are concerned about that because they're homophobic, right? Like no
Mm-hmm.
real reason. And I think that's like, like libs of TikTok is basically like industrializing what would have been like gossip among a few Christian parents or something.
So what's on libs of TikTok? What's the kind of content that they serve there?
They do a lot of it's interesting because so it's this woman, Chaya
Yeah, it's
Raichik.
just one woman, right?
Yeah. And she
And she had
used
some
to
sort of beef, some like reality TV-esque beef with Taylor Lorenz.
yeah, Taylor
Yeah.
Lorenz showed up to her house to who is this woman, right? Um
Uh-huh.
libs of TikTok, so originally like 2020, like thick of COVID, it was like me cold healing and libs of TikTok would post like the excesses of TikTok because it was easy engagement bait. I've like since deleted my thread because I felt like it was sort of like unethical to do this, but I would post like the most ridiculous TikToks I could find. And that's cold healing. He's another Twitter account and he does the same thing. He and I both were like more sort of good natured about it. Like I wasn't asking anyone to like go and harass these people. I was just sort of like, like, oh, this woman is saying that she's like literally a bird or so, just something kind of like out there, right? Just sort
Okay.
of for people's interest. But
Like
libs of
otherkin type thing, like on the border of going from social justice into like psychosis almost.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
it's something like that, right? Or like someone cooking something like very disgusting. It was there's all sorts of like weird things, and cold healing sort of
Okay.
does the same thing. But then in comes libs of TikTok, who started after both of us, um, and she instead of just sort of these like obvious kind of like I feel sort of bad saying this, but like these sort of like sideshows that like probably were already going viral, whatever. She took people
Lol
who were
cows.
like, yeah, who she took people who were like more like um left or progressive coded. So let's say
Mm-hmm.
like a preschool teacher who was also talking about LGBTQ rights or something like this. And she started rage baiting. So whereas like someone like myself or cold healing was sort of it's still questionable if this was ethical, but still, was saying like, oh, look at this weird thing we found online. She was like, you should be angry about this. And she grew really, really quickly. And she was like a regular on Tucker Carlson back when
Yeah.
he was still on Fox. And she was like a darling of the GOP and like Elon Musk really liked her. And now she does like a lot of different culture war topics, but originally her bread and butter was like frankly just like making fun of like queer people and also and buying into any like even if it was like a hoax, right? She would just like amplify sort of any sort of moral panic. And I don't think she is I think the way she was talked about maybe was like overstated in some ways, but she was doing like genuinely cruel things. Like people were getting called at their work. um they were she was exposing people's locations. um and for the
Mm.
most part it was mostly people who were doing nothing wrong. Every now and then there'd be someone where it was just sort of like maybe someone should have called them out, but for the most part it was just people who were like like a butch lesbian teaching preschoolers or something. It's like that didn't need that woman didn't need to be humiliated because libs of TikTok thought that was not safe for 4-year-olds or something.
Sure. At a certain point, it just becomes look how ugly this person is. Look how they've styled themselves in this way. That it seems grotesque. Yeah, I vaguely followed all of that, and I do think. I mean, you think about. Do you? I want to ask you this. How much stake do you put in this narrative that Gamergate was the domino that led to Donald Trump?
I think in some ways that's true.
Okay.
Wait, can I
um
interject for some
Yeah.
context? What is Gamergate?
I think Catherine should explain this. I
sure.
could try, but she'll do a better job.
So there was a female game journalist named Zoe Quinn. Or sorry, she wasn't it. There was a
She was
female
a game
game developer.
developer. She made a
She was a
game
game
called
developer.
Depression Quest.
Right, I misspoke. And she
Mm-hmm.
received a lot of good reviews, right? And it was supposedly because she had slept around for these reviews. And this started this chain reaction of people being angry about ethics in games journalism. But it was more, it was there was this broader problem um where, you know, the culture of video games was changing. Like video games were becoming, for lack of a better term, like more woke. The way games were reviewed, you know, were to use language that's, you know, more inclusive, you know, scare quotes, right? And so
Yeah, things like booth babes were all of a sudden being looked at as something maybe déclassé or problematic. The sort of the teenage boys fantasy was no longer like the Zeus of the gaming pantheon, you know.
right.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
And so what ended up happening was there's a bunch of like weird things that happen in Gamergate. So the long story short is it ends up as this sort of war of like the gamers who are mostly congregating on Twitter and image boards, and then the media and academics, right? And it's these two sides. So it's like
Mhm.
social justice warriors versus the gamers. But what's weird about Gamergate is there was a lot of people who like weren't involved in sort of the original conflict, who sort of inserted themselves as characters. Like a really good example of this is Brianna Wu, who
And this is
like kind
2017, by the way, for context. Yeah.
right. So Brianna Wu was like not
Oh wait, no,
involved at
it's not.
all.
2014. Sorry, because pre-Trump.
Oh right, right. It
Yes, yeah.
was
So 14.
2014,
Yeah.
2015.
Mm-mm.
Brianna Wu like inserted herself and like had claimed she had been being harassed. She wasn't. But it like turned into like a good vehicle for a lot of people to build their careers on. And they like weren't necessarily, there were some people who were being targeted and harassed, but there were people who weren't being targeted and harassed who claimed that they were. And ended up building followings off the backs of this. And this sort of happened on, you know, on both sides, right? Like people just sort of electing themselves as these like spokespeople. Like Milo Yiannopoulos blew
Yeah.
up during Gamergate. Ian Miles Chong. There's a lot of characters who were who became big during this period. And yeah, I mean it's very convoluted, and there's a lot of like micro events. But the reason that people think that it led to Donald Trump is because this was like a huge, the SJW stuff had been percolating in the background. There was like Dongle Gate, for example, like since about 2008. And this was like a big explosion, right? This was like a big volcano. And a
Yeah.
lot of people who hadn't been right coded or otherwise politically engaged became politically engaged because of, oh, actually, not just on the right. I mean, this happened on the right and left, became politically engaged as a result of Gamergate. And a lot of these people might have, you know, been at the edges of it and not really not really cared one way or the other. But Gamergate was sort of like the tipping point that we started to get really noticeably polarized. And it was because it was like very media driven. It was digital. There was still all eyes on digital media. And so they were able to have a little bit like more narrative control. And it was sort of like digital media versus like, you know, the counterculture at the time, which are like, that's represented by the gamers. So it's much easier to be like these two sides.
I would almost say Gamergate was this collision of these two institutions with their own sets of norms. One basically being like academic slash media culture and what you can get, you know, the level of whatever decorum, sexism, egalitarianism, liberalism you can get away with in these spaces, which also sort of included Tumblr, which had a lot of this sort of academic critical theory thought. And then like image board slash like literally like Call of Duty lobby culture and the norms around slurs, you know, toxicity, whatever, 4chan. And it's like, and they were like oil and water, or worse. They just combusted on contact. And around the same time, you think of the 80s, 90s, even 2000s, you think of like moral panics around like Mass Effect, like, oh, Alien Sex Simulator. Like all the moral scolding was like coming out of the right, the evangelical right. And then you got this shift where it's like, okay, now the moral scolding is kind of coming from the left. And so then these two Gamergate factions ended up kind of like mapping onto what the GOP would become and what the left would become in the late 2010s. It was like this big shift. I don't know. Maybe that's too simplified, but I kind of
it's hard to condense into usually when people say that, it's a little bit of a cop out, but there's so much happened during Gamergate. I think this has been like a struggle for like people who've tried to write books about it, or tried to like somehow convey it in like an article or something. It's very
yeah.
difficult to describe, because it really was a situation where there was like both sides were doing like deeply inappropriate things, and it's still also very divisive, right? Like it still gets described in this very like in sort of like legacy media. It still gets described in this very like two-dimensional way.
Yeah.
Is
So
Gamergate, is that about the time when like the red pill meme became more popular? Because like around 2014, 2015 is when I started seeing that come out.
So the red pill meme um has changed meaning over time. It had been popular earlier, but it was more associated with like dating culture. Like red when you would say like you're red pilled, or like you were like red pill used to be like exclusively like manosphere. um it was a particular way of viewing dating and sleeping with women. Like are the red pill or are red pill women on Reddit was like a very specific kind of like dating subculture. And then around that time, it started, as you say, it started shifting to mean like, you're red pilled on politics, right? Like you see the truth, and a lot of people got red pilled as a result of Gamergate.
what's hilarious? I'm only realizing this now. If you go down to the etymology, red pill obviously being from the Matrix, Neo takes the red pill to wake up. It's pretty much the exact same rhetorical conceit as woke, right? To be
Yeah.
woke is literally to be awoken to the reality of the world. And the red pill, similarly, is to be awoken to the reality of existence, right? Like it's these people saying that, like, you've broken the conditioning and now you're grasping a greater truth.
Well, that's the thing about like partisans in general. When you have like a two divided sides, is the, for lack of a better term, extremists on both sides both kind of value and feed off each other, because it's only when you have like libs doing crazy things that like you can use that as rage bait to grow your following on the right, and then vice versa. When you have people on the right doing crazy things, you can use that as rage bait to grow your following on the left, and they kind of have a way of feeding off each other. And after hearing Catherine and Kari, your description of Gamergate, it feels like in a way that was like a precursor to that dynamic happening online, getting supercharged.
It had been happening earlier. This was like that's why I like to think of it as
For
sort
me,
of
I
like a
remember
volcano.
Dick Wolves. When I was like 11 or 12, the penny arcade thing. Do you remember that, Catherine?
Yeah,
Yeah.
there it had been going on for a long time. Um, like when I started college is when you started having like the like anti SJW reaction videos on YouTube, which predates Gamergate and cultural appropriation. I mean, and then before that, Donglegate. Someone had made a joke about a big dongle and got in trouble. This was like a leading. There was all these like little micro events that led up to Gamergate,
Mm-hmm.
and also going on at the same time was we were moving to digital media, and reporters' budgets were getting slashed. And so a lot of these more obscure identities and beliefs were also being legitimated through digital media, which at the time, people did actually read these things, did actually read clickbait. So the cultural soup was like very strange, because like people were actually consuming clickbait. It wasn't like, I feel like right now we're in these filter bubbles where it's like there's all of these like magazines and blogs and stuff, and like, it's unclear like who the audiences for each thing are, and it's like very tough to figure out what's going on. But then it was, even though there was still a lot of slop, it did feel like it had more influence on the physical world and how people thought.
Yeah, the BuzzFeeds, the Gawkers, the clickbaits, they were hanging on. It seems like now almost we have this sort of Cambrian Substack thing where like what happened with podcasts is now happening with text, where you get
Yes.
these micro magazines for a couple thousand people. I'm myself running one of them, where everyone just sort of self-associates into these little things. So I want to ask you, there's this perception of polarization, that there's this great polarization, this great sort of bimodal distribution of culture on the internet. Is that true, or is it more multipolar than that?
No, I think like in wanting some semblance of coherence, like of course there are people who don't really fit into either side, but if you want to grow, you ultimately have to choose an allegiance. And so you have these people who are sort of like mismatched. I when I talk about this, I usually like use myself as an example, because it's like I think I'm perceived as being on the right, but I'm not really a rightist in the traditional sense. It's just like in this media environment, like 10, 15, 20 years ago, I would just be sort of my own thing, right? I'd maybe like write for someplace like Wired or the Village Voice. But we're in such a strange media environment that I like end up, right wing coded, which is, I think there are people who are coded left or right.
Yeah.
And it
I
doesn't
think
really matter.
at least 5 years ago, 10 years ago, when you were making these choices, and I've seen this a bit, it's very easy. There's a webcomic that people make fun of that talks about this, but like rightists really want voices that disagree with them in their media environment. Like if there's like a left liberal who is going to write for like a right-wing publication, they're like, yeah, come on, like be a columnist, like in a way that you're not going to see on the other side. So it's almost like anyone who's a mixed bag, there's this constant attractor toward places
Yeah.
like Pirate Wires, for example,
I think you're right. I mean, I do think the right um is more welcoming in certain ways. And then there's also the fact that like within the right is this sort of what I call like the heterodox center, where you have people like Katie Herzog or like Bari Weiss, where like they're not really rightists, but also like the left thinks they're fascists. But like if you
I
actually
guess Matt
examine,
Iglesias is a big example of this.
right.
His whole mission is basically to help Democrats win, and a lot of people would basically call him a rightist. I mean, that's what do you do with a guy like that?
Yeah, I mean it's a very weird ecosystem.
Yeah.
I've definitely
So I
know.
guess that you already preemptively answered a couple of my questions there, which was how do you fit yourself in there? Yeah.
I mean, I'm too I think I'm definitely too sort of like fluid really to be on the right, but I'm also too fluid in other ways to be on the left. So I'm kind of just like I like heterodox, because it's like, well, what else am I going to call myself?
Sure. Sure, that makes sense. I feel like I understand who you are, but I don't know if I could actually put it into words. Heterodox to me has this risk of like it sort of shares ground with like obstinate, where it almost
Yeah.
seems like somebody who is defining themselves to be contrary. And you don't strike me as a contrarian. You just strike me as someone who is assembling a worldview, trying to assemble a worldview outside of these poles, which I guess is tricky. Um,
Yeah.
why do you do what you do?
That's a good question. I've like constructed like several different origin stories for myself, or like personally, not not out in the world. And I think I just like it. I like talking to people. Um,
Hmm.
I think like I was so impacted by the internet that there's a real joy in like understanding the communities that have formed there. I do, and you know this I think better than anyone who reads me. I do think of the internet as a place. So I think of uh like a map, sort of helping map its geography. It's a very very big place, um, and there's a lot of work to be done, and I think people get stuck get stuck and they don't conceptualize it the right way, so they're not uh they're it really benefits to our understanding to think of it as a physical place almost, with many different tribes that live there.
I guess the difference being the geography of the Earth stays pretty similar for millions of years, and the geography of the internet is almost shifting year by year or decade by decade.
Yeah,
New land masses come and go.
yeah,
Hmm.
and some get lost forever.
Do you think that the work you're doing has a greater permanence than the things you study? Which is to say, like, obviously, internet subcultures are so ephemeral. Will your work studying them be sort of like a more permanent record of these people and how they lived?
I don't think they're as ephemeral as it seems on the surface.
Really?
Because they keep, yeah, because they keep, a lot of them are very old and they keep reinventing themselves. And there's a lot of value in like finding where the thread begins and seeing how things changed and grew. Um, like one that's like very, very old is like one of these communities that I think like people like rubberneck a lot are multiple systems or dissociative identity disorder, also known as multiple personality disorder. Um, they're not it's not one big community. There's multiples, like they don't all identify as having DID, what have you, but it is something that has been online for a very long time. And there have been like elders from the multiple community who have like moved and migrated from platform to platform. And you might not realize it, or like, not everyone in the community might realize it, but there is like a sense of continuity. And it's true with like otherkin as well. There's well, I guess what I'm trying to say is like a lot of things that seem new are actually really old, and they're not only really old, but like the founders of these communities in many cases remain and sort of just end up blending into the background. um, but you start understanding like how certain things came to be, why they have the flavor they have, why certain decisions were made, why certain language was chosen. Like with otherkin, like where does that word even come from? Well, it started
Yeah,
off.
explain if you would what this is for our audience.
Sure. So otherkin are people who feel like they are in a human body with a non-human soul. Um, and this is a very common thing, and there's many different internet subcultures around this. But how the word came to be was originally there was these fan letters, or like fanzines, that were
Hmm.
sent around by this group called the Silver Elves, and they were elfkin, right? So they thought that um, they had elven spirits, and the backdrop of this is the paperback for Lord of the Rings had just come out, and this caused an explosion in neo-paganism. Um, but it also
In
created
the
like very,
70s?
yes. So
Yeah.
this also had an explosion of like live action role playing communities and sort of like Renaissance fair style communities around Lord of the Rings. So this is where the elfkin come. And so when they moved to a list serve, so when they moved to email, there, it's someone said something like, "This is for elfkin," or otherkin, and it was originally like
Mm,
other space kin.
right.
And then from there it developed and grew over time, and as they migrated to different platforms, they absorbed different social norms, and they splintered, and there's different subgroups, but every but every subculture is like this. um
Is this a kind of dysphoria to think that your soul is elven or wolven or whatever?
um I guess, yeah. I guess it can be.
Hmm.
Some people, they'll get like surgeries to better match,
Right.
um or
I
like they'll
almost
feel more
wonder,
comfortable online.
and I've had the advantage of having heard you talk a little about this at the what was it called, the Philosophical Research Institute.
Yeah.
But I almost wonder if like this sort of the scrying, this process of leaving your body to go onto the internet, it accentuates this mind body dualism, you know? Like you spend so much time inhabiting an avatar that your body feels more optional, you know, and not a part of the self. Do you see this in people who are online a lot?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. And you see it in like ordinary people too, where like, like one place that and it's been written about now, like by big publications, is like if you're seeing yourself mostly through like your TikTok camera, TikTok makes you look a little bit different than you do even in the mirror. And you look
Mm-hmm.
different in the mirror than you do in and a photograph taken with a back facing phone camera or even a real camera. And so people they start creating like this dissonance, like the person I really am is the person through the front facing TikTok camera. um and so they'll pursue surgery to look more like that, not just with the filter but just the way the lens is. um so that, I mean, that's like one sort of more like ordinary version, but I think it like manifests in other ways. Like you might feel, like I think you become like attached to your profile picture on social media. And like let's say you have like an anime girl PFP on
Mm-hmm.
Twitter, and people sort of subconsciously treat you with the emotions they ascribe to that image, and then you, for whatever reason, absorb that in your own way, and you feel sexier, or maybe you feel more mischievous, or you feel any which way, but your physical body is like, uh, totally incongruous with that. Um, you start to feel uncomfortable in the physical world, and I think like everyone has experienced this. In different forms, it's in more or less extreme ways. And I think it can be really difficult, and it's like one of these things that I think we all know but we struggle to put into words. I think it's safest to talk about sort of like the selfie dysmorphia. um but the problem is, I think people are hesitant to talk about it in depth because one conclusion that I think people have drawn from this or could draw from this is it somehow like invalidates transgender identity. And I think that's part of the big fear around talking about the mind body disconnect as, um, as related to the internet. And people, they don't want to even open up that can of worms. And I probably shouldn't have myself, but it's sort of the elephant in the room with this discussion. And my answer to that is just because this exists, it doesn't mean that other phenomenon can't exist.
Sure. And even now, I mean, look how elliptically we approach the subject here on the show. I think there is this sort of like Straussian technique people use where you try to discuss these issues in such a way that the right listener will pick up on it, and yet you're not creating a soundbite that is going to lead to I what did I have? I had somebody emailing me the other day. They actually teach you you're not supposed to talk about people who harassed you on the internet, I think, because that encourages more people to do it. So I'm going to take my small amount of media training and leave that one be. But there are some weirdos out there for sure.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there there definitely are. um yeah, it can be hard. For me, this is always something I run into because, like, I was thinking about this when we were talking about lives of TikTok. Like, I I both think there can be like very ridiculous expressions of identity, and that there is something very real and worth respecting there. I think like otherkin is a very good example of this. Like, I don't think it's I actually don't think it's like necessarily ridiculous to feel like you have the soul of an elf or a dolphin or a bird or whatever. And this is something that's well established in religion, and there's mythological stories about this, and there's many different ways that can be understood and expressed, and it's I think very like closed-minded and myopic to immediately discount that as like somehow this like absurd experience that is like worthy of making fun of. At the same time, if a 22-year-old Starbucks barista is flapping her wings like a bird at her place of work and being kind of silly, and maybe it's and maybe she's even consciously joking, right? Like
Yeah.
there's humor in that, and it's
Or
both.
creating a challenge where it's like, I have so little control over my life. I feel so exploited by my work or my school or society. I'm going to create an identity for myself where I can hold this line in the face of people who might feel annoyed or might want to push back, and just go, no, this is me, accept it. And like you're choosing a place to make a stand for something. It almost doesn't
Right.
matter what it is. You want to assert yourself against the world in a way, Yeah.
Yeah, and I totally agree. But when you're talking about it on a show, it's like it's so like sometimes I do want to laugh at some of these things, but I also don't want to invalidate anyone. But then also, right, there's this other thing where it's like something can be real, but in some circumstances inappropriate, or maybe like it goes against my personal ethics. Like it's so hard to represent some of these issues, partially because people are so ready to clip things and yell at you and be mad at you. It's like very like you everyone sort of ends up painting themselves in a corner, and sometimes that corner is just
Yeah.
saying fuck it and being as inflammatory as possible right out of the gate.
I think this is one reason why the subcultures kind of bifurcate, right? Is because you have your circle that you trust and you care what they think, and you feel comfortable expressing yourself according to that like subculture's
Yeah.
norms. And when someone from outside that culture says like, "Ha ha ha," isn't that like crazy, and then tries to harass you for it, you don't take it quite as personally because they're outside of the group you care about. And it feels like just the nature of human beings interacting at scale, at this kind of scale, which has never happened before in history of the universe. You kind of have to create these subcultures in a way to survive.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's something I return to a lot in my work and on shows too. Is in a lot of ways I was happiest. Well, it's tough. I'm pretty happy now because I have a beautiful family. But that aside, I think I was very happy when I only really knew about and interacted with my immediate environment, and I was still very online. But my chief concerns were like, like I took a dance class every day, and there was different drama and gossip or whatever that happened in that community. And then I had a religious community I was very committed to, um, and it was just like the same 15 people, and that was it. And it was very low stakes in like a broader sense, but also it was just like I knew everyone and everything in my life very intimately and very, and very immediately, and it wasn't mediated at all. And so it was. I think I was like just happier. Like those were my concerns. Just like so and so at dance class is doing a shit job, and the performance is gonna be crap and whatever. Like, then that was sort of like I think the best way to be.
There is this tension with people who are very online, especially people in their 20s and 30s, I think, where back in the liberal days of Twitter, people would say hell site a lot. Oh, look at this
Yeah.
hell site, right? And yet, basically the idea that being here is some sort of punishment, it makes us miserable, and yet, of course, we log in every day. Does this suggest some sort of compulsive or like addictive self-sabotaging behavior that people describe the internet so negatively and yet they constantly log on? Or are they just sort of being insincere about the good?
I think it's both. Um,
Hmm.
I think a lot of people feel like they have no other place to go. Um,
Mm.
to bring back the point about like my dance class, like for a lot of people, like the world, their particular Twitter filter bubble is their dance class. Like it serves the
Mm-hmm.
same purpose for them, and it feels bigger than it is, but it's actually very small. And it helps them make sense of the world, even if they hate it, and you become used to it, and you don't want to leave.
Do you think third places have actually dried up as people have gone online, or do you think there are still vital, vibrant third places just as much as in decades past?
What's a third place? Sorry to
Like a
interrupt.
coffee shop or a park or shopping mall, like a pub
A public
almost
place
public
where you
place.
can socialize
Yeah.
with people that are not your immediate circle.
Um yes and no. I think it depends on where you are. I think in some places they definitely have. In other places they haven't. I think there are also a lot of cities that try to revitalize and nobody's coming, or the wrong people are coming. And by the wrong people, I mean like people just want to take advantage of the situation, or who are like a nuisance in some way, who leave litter or are rude. Um, like I think,
Unconscientious people.
yeah. Um, I like when I lived in Austin, and this is like 10 years ago now. It did feel like there were a lot of attempts at like having events to bring people together. And a lot of them were failures. Like either the event would, like, they put more effort into the title on the Facebook event page than the actual event, or nobody came, or people came and were just on their phones, or the people who did come were there just to be like kind of rude for whatever reason. So that's like one thing. But then like in Chicago, for example, it feels like everyone really participates and tries their best and is trying to have a good time and is trying to get to know people. I
This
pointed
is
out,
a perfect segue into something I wanted to ask you about,
sure,
which is that you were recently a participant in an official Substack event, right?
yes,
This was a debate.
yes.
And so tell us a little about what this was and what you did and how it all came about.
So I saw Substack was hosting a bunch of events in New York, and I sent them an email and I said, "There's lots of people in Chicago going to do it here," and they said, "Sure, let's plan something." Um,
You
and
initiated this.
yeah, I was like,
Great.
"Why not me?"
Yeah.
Basically. Um, and so they have a couple of like formats that they do these events in, and we weren't sure like what would be a good fit, and finally we were like, let's try a debate. And I write a lot about sex on the internet, or topics related to sex and to the internet, and people always you're always going to show up for sex related things. um,
Yeah.
and the rest is history. I helped them choose a venue. I mean, I was really hands on in the organizing of it. We did it at a circus. I chose the I chose the place. We went through quite a few other places before we landed on that one. There was like the surgical museum, but it was like
Yeah.
the room was too thin and the seats were kind of meh, and it was hot. And there was
Were you perhaps dealing with an older Korean woman in booking the venue? Because apparently Lillian Wang Salonik, my off and on co-host, her mother is the events coordinator for the event space where you did that debate.
I don't think so, but maybe someone
All
on
right.
Substack's end.
It's a small world, it's really a small
That's
world
crazy.
out there.
That is a very small world situation.
And so she was mad that her mom didn't tell her that this was happening so she could come. But yeah.
That's too bad.
Okay. So there were a few people there. It's funny. I've like spoken personally. Well, now you and Blassie and Ayla. Is it 2 syllables Ayla, or is it 3 syllables Ayla?
It's Ayla. A lot of people get her name wrong.
How many syllables is that?
Ooh, I think Ayla.
Ayla. Okay. Yeah, that's what I thought. All right. So she was there, and I don't even know how to describe her, but I think we have a beef technically because I wrote something.
Is she left coded or right coded? That's what I want to
Well,
know.
she's right coded for sure.
She's right coded.
Right coded.
For
But
sure.
she's kind of drifting into the center left. I feel in terms of like uh you know, her genre, not her beliefs, but
I would say
she's
she's
very
like Hananian in her beliefs a
yeah,
bit.
she's a they're both very libertarian, I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, so I actually know less about Hanania's beliefs, but Ayla for sure I would say libertarian.
I'm so out of the loop. Okay, Hanania is right.
Richard Hanania is like a post-right guy,
Yeah.
kind of like he sort
I've
of
seen some
like
of
took
his
the Richard Spencer
tweets.
arc, but a couple of years later.
Yeah, I saw some of his
Sorry,
rage
this all sounds so brain rotty when you say it out loud.
Sorry for making you guys do that. I'm just, I'm still like, I'm still coming. I didn't know who Charlie Kirk was really until like a few weeks ago, and so I'm
Yeah.
still getting up to speed on the internet. Like,
Ayla
record.
is like she's a writer, she's a pop sexologist. She does big studies on sexual feelings and an influencer and a high-end escort. That's her deal.
Triple threat.
And she created
And I
a
guess
card
also a
game.
debater.
Yeah. And a
And
rationalist.
she made like a board game about taboos and some
She's a
other stuff.
rationalist.
So how was it? How was the experience?
It went really well. I felt like kind of underprepared. I wasn't like sure how to prepare, and then Blas and I like didn't meet up beforehand. But I think we thought on our feet. We did pretty well. It was. I mean, one thing that really stood out to me is nobody was on their phone because I was also
Oh, that's
I
great.
participated, but I also emceed, and I was like looking out into the audience, and everyone was like engaged, and I and it was also a packed house, so it felt like a huge success for me. I was like, wow.
Congratulations. That's a huge accomplishment, by the way.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.
I'm hoping maybe I'm not sure who we would get, but it would be very cool to do something like that in LA. Actually, one of my first introductions to this kind of heterodox internet writer nonsense was it was a similar topic. The Free Press did the has the sexual revolution failed debate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you at that, or did you know of that?
I didn't end up going because I was a very big pregnant woman. My son was very, very heavy, and I was
Fair.
just like too large to like move. So I was like, I'm just not gonna.
Understandable. Great excuse.
It's like this is just obscene.
What was the outcome of the debate? Did the sexual revolution fail?
The not failed won very slightly. Yes, and that was I believe it was Sarah Hyder and Grimes were arguing that it had not failed, and they made a slightly better argument. So I think it was deserved. But yeah, what was the outcome? I want to know of the Chicago debate.
So we had multiple topics. And the topic that I did is the internet reprogramming our sexuality, or is it innate? It's sort of a bad question. I'm going to be honest. Interesting discussion though. Ayla and Paul Bloom, who's a psychologist at University of Toronto, were arguing that our sexual desires are so we weren't arguing about sexual orientation, but sexual desires.
Right.
And they were saying it's innate. And I was saying, or Blasey and I were saying that certain aspects of it might be innate. So like you might be predisposed to wanting to be dominated or something, but the particular expression of that is culturally informed, and our culture is internet culture. And Paul Bloom and Ayla were on the opposite of that, and they actually won.
Interesting. It's difficult because obviously there could be a synthesis of these. I tend to sort of lean toward your side that these things are malleable. Were you placed on these sides based on what you really believe, or were you sort of arbitrarily given a position, or kind of both?
Based on what we believed.
Okay. I see. Would you do something like this again?
I don't know if I'm great at debating, but I would MC another
MC.
one.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm trying to
that
do
would be
more
my
events in
inclination
Chicago
as well. I don't know if I would debate. I'm not trained. Okay.
Yeah, I get so one of the reasons Paul and Ayla won is one of the studies that I used had only it was never replicated. There's only 5 people in the study. It just sort of is like a flashy sort of like sounds good if you say it. But I had printed out a stack of studies, but I was so nervous because there's all these people there, and I was like, oh, I look like a nerd, shuffling through my papers, that I didn't mention them because I was like I gotta be funny and charming, and then I like I couldn't like my papers weren't organized. I don't know, and I didn't mention any of them. But if I was more comfortable with public speaking and debating, I would have just sucked it up and been like, this study and this, like, why did I print all this shit out if I'm not going to use it?
I have a question about this debate, or about the overall question, which is, so I'm thinking about examples of internet subculture, especially vis-a-vis like sexual desires. And the example that's just sort of screaming in my mind is like the furry community. Like, I have no doubt that, that community, like, these are genuine desires that they have, and it's something that they really enjoy, and it's very meaningful for them. But that said, like, it's hard to see it as in any way, shape, or form that's not at least partially culturally mediated. Like the whole, like, nylon plastic furry suits didn't exist. Like, it's only because of our culture that they have these things.
And our industrial processes.
Yeah, and if that's not culture, like, I mean, you don't see that in the Middle Ages that I'm aware of.
Well, that one, I thought about that one too, and I was like, oh, well, that's sort of like a kill shot. But when I've spoken, and I'm sure Ayla would say the same thing, when I've spoken to people in the furry community, or when I've not even spoken to them, when like this is something that's super common when you read like their like diaries, or you watch documentaries or something that comes up all the time is that they realized they were furry. They might not have had the name for it, and it might not have been explicitly sexual. It certainly wasn't explicitly sexual, but they realized they had an attraction to anthropomorphic animals when they were exposed to Disney movies. And this is like, when you watch, there's one documentary that I really like about the furry community called Ruckus, and the documentarian is introduced to the furry community through this young woman who, like, I think like really liked the Lion King or something, and had like Lion King stuffed animals. If I'm remembering correct, it's like a 3-hour long movie, and the last time I watched it was when it premiered at South by Southwest in 2016. But this is like an identifiable type, where it's like, this person goes on to become a furry. Like,
couldn't
they have this
it be
sort of
possible that the act of imprinting on the Disney movie is what's creating the paraphilia? That what they see as something being awakened in them is actually them being changed by the media?
I don't know. I don't know.
I mean,
I don't know what
know
the causality is.
Even if it's like innate, which I'm prepared to believe that it probably is innate, at least for some people, that the way,
like, how does it express itself outside of a society that doesn't have anthropomorphic cartoon animals? I agree. Like, what is the core? Because what's interesting about a lot of furries is like the core desire isn't towards animals, right? Like, there is certainly a subset of furries that are interested in animals, but what makes someone a furry is like cartoon animals, a specific style that is very common in comic books and movies and stuff. Like, where I agree, like, what is there something hypnotic about that art style to certain people? Like, I don't know, like, what is the core thing that's attracting them?
I remember getting into this large argument. I think I must have been in my early 20s. I was probably just out of college, and my mom was talking about my sibling being in high school, and there being, how high schools have these officially sponsored clubs, like a teacher has to like agree to sponsor the club, and then they get resources and stuff. There was a furry club at this high school.
Okay.
And they were basically, this high schoolers were acting like this wasn't weird at all. It was just like any other identity club. Why shouldn't it be a group? And I was arguing to my mother, no, these are zoophiles. These are creeps. They shouldn't be allowed to. I was like, I was being like very harsh, and my mother was like, "They just like the suits and the ears and the nose, and I don't know. It is sort of a cultural battleground, I guess."
Yeah, it's furries have been they're sort of like the original like law cow community in a lot of ways because for as long as there's been an internet, there have been furries, and for as long as there have been furries, there's been people to make fun of them. But they're not all zoophiles. I mean, there's overlap, but it's not everyone.
Sure, sure.
In
We
defense.
should, I feel bad. We should get Trace Woodgrains on here. He was actually our very first guest that we recorded was
Get him
Yeah,
Trace
to
Woodgrains. And
defend.
I know he has a lot of strong takes on furrydom.
yeah, we didn't get to that side, but I guess that's why we need to follow up.
No, so we'll get him back. We'll get him back for a furry episode. I, the internet, it's like, this is another thing I want to ask. And Kenny, I want to make sure anything you want to get to, we address. But I want to ask you, Catherine, is there institutional money interested in supporting internet ethnography? You know,
Yeah, I mean, there's a
there is.
lot. Yeah, I mean, it happens in academia, like arguably fan studies, which is a study of fandoms, which has existed, I believe, since like the late '80s, as like a proper discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Is part of internet studies. Sherry Turkle is one of the most famous internet sociologists ever, and she was at MIT. I believe she's at
Mm-hmm.
Harvard now. I mean, like long way of saying there's definitely there's def the problem is a lot of so there's two types of like internet ethnography broad or three types, let's say. There's the stuff
Mm-hmm.
journalists do, there's the stuff YouTubers do. I think we really sleep on YouTubers who sort of document internet drama as important kind of archivists of this stuff. And then there's stuff that
Do
happens in
video
academia.
essays.
Yeah. Like I
Mm.
think like the work, like for example, like Turkey Tom or Strange Eons, like they might not have the same like quality standards as like someone who's at a legacy publication or who's in academia might have, but it's still record keeping that I think is like very
Yeah,
important
these
and no one else is.
become the best primary and secondary source. I mean,
Yeah.
Herodotus makes shit up too, but he's still our best source for a lot of stuff. Just
Yeah.
because no one else was writing it down. One day, maybe Turkey Tom in 200 years will be like the best primary source we have for XYZ meme, Yeah.
Yeah. Know your meme, speaking of that, I
Yes.
mean, so yeah, I mean the problem is they're either not taken seriously or they're like paywalled away in academia. There's this woman, I always forget her name. It's like Jilly something, but anyway, she does work on femcells. I think she's out of the UK, and like she's doing like really really good work, but like she gets on like these BBC documentaries, but her work's not like super well known because it's a distribution problem.
Right. I was thinking about this because you know how each American president gets a library. This is the thing that we do. Like they're
Yeah.
currently building the Obama library. I had this thought. I was like, I don't really think Donald Trump reads. So it seems a little inappropriate to build like a Trump library for a man who like doesn't read books. And then I was thinking, well, but he is one of the greatest tweeters of all time. So wouldn't it be appropriate to have the Trump library be a center for internet history and internet, social media ethnography? So I think, Catherine, I think you should be like the head librarian of like memetic studies at the Trump library. And it can be like all like OLED screens, and you go in and you're basically like taken through like internet history.
If you
That's
spend
my
too much time
vision.
there, you just like go blind. That's a curse. Too much
They
screen.
said it would happen to all of us. I don't know. Um, Kenny, is there anything you want to get to on this matter?
Honestly, miraculously, you took the words out of my mouth. But when we were talking earlier about all the different internet ethnography work you've done, Catherine, I was thinking like this is the internet's Herodotus. Like all we know about the internet about that time of history was because this one Greek dude decided to write it all down. And I think in general, a part of the problem why I think it doesn't get the treated with the seriousness it deserves is so much of our like modern life, we just take for granted. We like, oh, that's not serious. But then like 100, 200 years from now, like most of it just gets forgotten. Like how much of like Victorian life did day-to-day people just take for granted and like didn't write down
Yeah.
and never know about it. And on the one hand, a lot of this internet stuff is like written down, but it's like all just dispersed, and it's really important to synthesize it. So
I think that there's many different avenues to archiving internet history and internet culture, and there are many people who are doing great work. Like we're talking about this, there's the Internet Archive, right? But
Yeah.
I do think that you're right. We don't take it seriously, and we even though there's so much time that's poured into it, we might have like a dark ages. It might get lost still.
I mean, so many things only exist like in the Wayback Machine.
Yeah.
I think if the Wayback Machine were to be destroyed, we would lose like an almost incalculable amount of cultural data.
there's also
Yeah.
something to be said for like primary sources. Yes, definitely want to preserve them, but it's also I think important to preserve what people at the time contemporaries thought about what was happening.
Mm.
Like a lot of when they study the Civil War in American history, which came to mind for absolutely no reason whatsoever, but like when you study the Civil War, a lot of it is like, well, what did people in the North and South like actually think about current events? It's not just like what happened when and what battle where and what legislative act. It was like, well, what did regular people think? What were they discussing?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I do like ethnographic interviews, and that's part of why like it's hard to leave your filter bubble, but also like you read a forum thread or something and it's out of context. Like you really do need people's memories, and you need to create like a patchwork quilt of many different people's memories. um there's I feel like there's a very like zero sum attitude towards content. Like I hate to even call it that, but it is what it is. And internet history is the sort of thing that like there can't be one internet history or internet culture person. It needs to be many people. It needs to be everyone in a sense, for the reason you're saying, Kenny.
Hmm. There, I want to ask just because you talk about this sort of being heterodox, not being able to be pinned down by a political tribe. And in a way, this is a very luxurious way to live. It's almost, you either have to be like a homeless guy or independently wealthy or just like really brave
It's the
to
question, which
to be
one am I,
willing to be
homeless or wealthy?
publicly heterodox. And I don't know. I think watching cancellations through all my formative years, these cancellations, it's like there's really two ways they get you, right? Like they either get you fired or they break up your family, estrange you from your loved ones. Do do you think that I don't know. I get the sense that some of your bravery comes from the fact that you feel somewhat secure both in your family life and in your career. Do you think that you're less cancelable maybe than the average American in that way?
I mean, like I have a lot of fear about pissing people off. I mean, I actually am a
Mm.
weird I'm like an inversion of this almost, because it's like I'm so scared of pissing anyone off that I've put myself in this weird kind of center, where it's like I've fence sat so long that I kind of fit into neither side.
Hmm.
So I don't know if it's like brave. I think it's actually like the opposite of bravery. Like I'm just like I just consider people's feelings like to a fault. Um, but I mean, like, would my family abandon me if like someone brigaded me or something? No, they wouldn't. Um,
That's good.
yeah, and I hope
Okay.
hopefully I could. I remain employed as well, but who knows? I've been very scared of that for a very long time. Because it's humiliating, right? Like I feel a lot of compassion for people this has happened to on any side of the aisle, just on
Sure.
principle. It's like so hard to like you lose all your friends like that. That's my nightmare.
Much less get shot in the neck, which is maybe the ultimate form of
Right.
cancellation.
I mean,
So let's hope
yeah.
that doesn't happen either to
I
any
would
of
say
us.
if you lost your friends
Cairo.
over a tweet, then they weren't your friends.
Well,
Yeah, I guess
yes,
so. I
yeah,
guess
but
so.
I try to look at it from the perspective of like if they genuinely believe that you're doing something evil, like it's rational within their own world. It sucks. I think a lot of these
That
people
now
are
that's what they
unwell,
call
but
actual empathy, beyond sympathy.
I
Yes.
can't imagine.
I understand why you would attack me being you. Yes.
I can't imagine a single one of my friends like, or I can't imagine a single one of my friends like tweeting something where I'd be like, well, we can't be friends anymore. They might tweet something where I'm like, oh, dude, what? Where did that come from? That's weird, or like not great, but
Mm.
I'd still like go surfing with them, you know?
a friend a couple of months ago tweet something that I found like so out of pocket, and I'm not going to say who it was or what it was, but they tweeted something so out of pocket and like just offensive to me that I remember like reading it to my mom and being like, should I be friends with this person anymore? My mom was like, it's okay to forgive people for their faults, but that one's a bridge too far. That's like creepy as hell. And I was like, I agree. It's just too much. I'm so shocked they even think this. And I kind of avoided them for a while. And then like I just forgot about it, and now we hang out again. That's sort of my experience.
And did you ever have a conversation with this person about the tweet in question?
No, I never brought it up. I just some time passed and I got over it. And they've never expressed a similar sentiment again. I'll never know if they were joking. It feels too late to ask, and that's it.
I think it's safe to say if America had a higher percentage of Catherine Dees, the world would be a better place. But I don't
Less
know.
would
We'll
get
just
done.
see. I do think a lot of our personalities are made by our environment, not innate. So hopefully we can foster an environment of kindness for the next generation. Not Gen Alpha is already cooked. I'm sorry, it's over for them. But maybe the
Yeah.
children of Gen Z can be a little
Well,
normal.
Gen Beta is already here. My
Really?
child
I
is
guess
Gen
that's your
Beta.
son would be Gen Beta, huh?
Yeah, and I will say I think like the parents in my cohort have taken a good look around and seen Gen Z and Gen A and have been like, "Oh god, there's no
Oh
way."
yeah.
And they're trying to clean up the mess.
And would you call yourself a millennial then? Okay, you and Kenny both. Yeah, I guess I'm like on the older side of Gen Z, and I think that for us, Gen Z, having been raised basically unsupervised on the internet, pretty much everyone I talk to in their late 20s is like, yeah, we're going to be very restrictive,
You know what it
or
Yeah.
at least keep an eye on what our kids are doing
what
online.
this moment kind of reminds me of in terms of like child rearing and the approach to like screen time and internet is like back in the day they just put lead in gasoline and they're like, what's the problem? And it like, I mean, basically like, especially in urban areas where air quality was worse, like became endemic because something about like developing children's brains being exposed to lead, it leads to poor impulse control and their general delinquent behavior. They
Yeah.
took lead out, and urban centers not perfect, but they're a lot safer and nicer than they were back when lead was like rampant. And I feel like we're finally waking up to the fact like, maybe unrestricted screen time and internet time for developing minds is really just not the way to go about it.
And you
Yeah.
can steel man internet use for children if you want to, Catherine. I want to hear it if you think.
Nope. I
Nope.
used to be sort of like contrarian about it, but then, then I was blocked and reported, and Katie Herzog was like, "So, like, are you going to give your children, unrestricted access to the internet?" And the answer is no. Like like, especially like my son, like I'm doing like forest school and stuff. Like I like who am
Forest
I?
school?
Yeah, like I take him
What is
out into the
that?
woods. It's like one of these hippie like
Do they go into the
unschooling
woods?
things. Yeah.
We
I
don't
mean,
have forest here. It would have to be like desert school.
right now it's just like mommy and me. It's not he's too young for like real school, but I'm thinking like I'm raising him the most like woo woo hippie way. So like
Yeah.
what the fuck am I tied defending the iPad kid? No. If I'm not going to do it with my own family, I'm not going to pretend. Look at all these books. I want him to see books.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh-huh.
don't get me wrong, like those chat GPT is a great resource to learn, and I don't have a kid, but if I had a kid I would want them to learn how to use computers and take advantage of the internet and how to be a person on the internet. But you also like I want to protect them from the brain rot, at least for as long
Yeah.
as I can.
Well, there's ways. I think there's.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's ways to introduce technology that's productive. Like a lot of like it's really simple, but like a lot of Gen Z and Gen A apparently don't know how to type, right? They don't know how a computer works.
Which is absurd because they also can't
Yeah.
write by hand. So that means the only way they can write is with their thumbs. No, my fiance is a tutor, and not just she doesn't just get middle and high schoolers who can't really write neatly. Some of them, their hand muscles are literally so atrophied that if they try to handwrite at length, I mean their hand just starts shaking. They can't do it. They haven't built
That's
the muscles
crazy.
in their fingers to write.
That's That's really upsetting.
Yeah.
Wow, I never thought that like penmanship would be like our
So they
generation.
have to build it up over weeks. Like it's like almost like occupational therapy to be able to write.
Wow.
Kyra, it's like our generation is to penmanship the way our grandparents were to like manual labor. They're like, what do you
Like
mean you
some of the
can't do
last
manual?
ones, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, well, I just didn't grow up like working in the field like you guys, and I just it hurts me.
Yeah.
They're just
Yeah,
like,
with
oh
the
God, what a weak generation is probably what they are thinking. And now
Yeah,
I
I mean
see,
my grandma grew up literally picking tobacco in the summer. That's what she did.
uh,
I wouldn't know how to pick tobacco.
I yeah, I
I
speaking of
I may be severely underestimating the craftiness of my children, but I currently have some plan to basically have a non-networked PC for them in their room so they can still get some of the skills and basically just have a set of software that is picked, whatever.
hey, if they're
We'll
crafty
see how
enough to
long until they go buy like a USB Wi-Fi stick and plug it in there secretly. Yeah, sorry, you were saying, Catherine.
Not. I mean, I agree with you.
Hmm. Well, we'll see. It's weird how you talk to a couple Americans at a time and it's so polite and pleasant, but then you start talking to a couple million Americans at a time and it just seems really, really awful. So somewhere between a couple and a million, like the scale breaks down.
we
Yeah.
lack the social mores to be civil at scale.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what we do about that. Civil War, soft Civil War, yay, nay. What do you think? Is it coming?
I mean, I sure hope not.
Me too.
I live in Chicago, so I sure hope not.
Oh yeah, talk about purple. I mean, you're kind of in the
Yeah.
thick of it there, huh?
Yeah, it feels like California wouldn't be a good place to be if there was a civil war either.
No, we don't. We get a lot of water. We get all our water like from Colorado. We don't really desalinate. We would probably need like other countries to send us a bunch of
I'm like,
stuff so we wouldn't all
that
starve.
that would be
So no,
so crazy.
not great here either. Yeah. But we'll see. I don't think, for the record, I think at worst we might get like kind of low level weather underground esque nonsense. But I think people are a little too materially comfortable to want to really go to war. It's just they don't
Some
have it in
people
them.
really aren't. I think part of the problem is some people live very hard like a lot of people live very hard lives,
Mm.
um, and feel like they have nothing to lose. I mean, that's not a good society to have. Like I like personally know a lot of people where it's like their whole existence is working some dead end job where they can just barely, pay for their lives, and like the only thing that really gives them any kind of joy is like, getting a beer with their friends. And like, but that's it. There's nothing. They don't think they'll ever get married. They don't think they'll ever have a life outside of their work. It's just, and I think that's just very common. I mean,
Oh wait,
then
this is
hasn't
worth
that been most
talking
of
about.
history?
Even though we're all too old to really address this, but so I'm 28. Kenny, you're I can't remember.
37.
37?
I'm
No
right. I'm
way.
right. I'm 33, so I'm right
Okay,
in the.
so we're all hanging out in this sort of lower millennial range. But I talk to people I'd say under 26, so born 99 and later,
Okay.
and they talk with such envy of people our age about relationships. They go, "Oh, you guys are so lucky. You got to date before dating became horrible." They use the phrase "last chopper out of Nam." That's like the
Yeah.
phrase they use. Do you see this with young people online? This sort of despondency over modern dating.
Not with all of them, but with some of them.
Hmm.
And I
Do you think it's
almost
overblown or
I don't know. I don't want to say it's overblown. Like it's easy for me to say in my 30s, and
sure?
I've been in the same relationship for like 6 years or something. Like, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like, it seems like a bullshit thing to say. So I don't know. I will say that
We
like
should
I
get a
have
young person on.
friends.
We can ask them this question.
You should. I mean, I have friends who are my age and older who are dating and seem to be doing fine, but is that because they're dating people their own age and older?
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I
I
don't know.
wonder if it's like geographic too. Like
I think it's definitely geographic.
I think like the big cities is probably people feel it feels like people are more alienated in big cities than if you go to more like mid-sized towns.
I think like probably the best places to date are like second tier cities. I don't want to say like Chicago is a good place to date, but I bet it's like as a like average looking woman, it's probably more comfortable to date in Chicago than New York or LA.
This is bait. I'm not gonna take it.
No, I'm just just any sort of hypothetical woman.
Okay.
Or Denver or Austin, right? Like it's probably like yeah, I mean it should I think that's just that's one of my I've been saying that since day one.
I wonder
Yeah.
too if the like it does seem, I mean statistically it sounds like people are, going on fewer dates, like more people are single, etc. If you believe the statistics, then the trend is real. I wonder
Yeah.
if it's somewhat our subjective experience of the trend, of the cultural trend, is amplified by the fact that the people that are perennially online are probably even less likely to be dating. And so they're the people's voices we hear the most, whereas the people who are less online are more likely to be in happy relationships and you hear them talk about it less.
Probably true. I guess I would say I don't know. I'm not like a. We talked to Lyman Stone, who's like a big birth rates guy. I don't know if I'd call myself like a birth rates guy. Probably not. But I do think that there are good things that come out of people being in relationships. I think they make them happy. I think men and women, as we can see, are politically bifurcating. And I think having to compromise and cooperate and build a life with some of the opposite sex, one, humanizes the opposite sex to you, and two, sort of makes you moderate a little bit, which is probably good for the nation. And like building a life that you care about also gives you something to live for, which gives you like stake in not burning the country down, you know?
Yeah.
So like for all those reasons, I really do hope these Gen Zs do find families or something.
You are Gen Z, right? Like
Yeah,
the
I'm the first year. Yes.
yeah,
So we joke
you're
because I'm
you're
I'm
definitely not a millennial.
97. My fiance is 96. So we joke that I'm it's a Gen Z millennial pairing. Um, yeah, yeah. And I fully do claim Gen Z. Um,
You should.
I do. Yes. Someone said. Someone who came over the other day. She's my age. She said she claims whichever one gets her more clout in a given situation, millennial or Gen Z. I think I do the same thing. It's just always Gen Z. So I don't know, but we like our millennials, folks. We do. Man, this has been a good hour and a half. I want to ask you, Catherine, because I've been remiss to get into this. What are the big projects you are working on? I mean, you do so much. You have a call-in show. You write for all these publications. Obviously, the best place to follow Katherine Dee is to subscribe to Default Blog. But like, how does someone get the Katherine Dee experience? Like, what are you doing?
Yeah. Okay, so definitely subscribe to my blog, default.blog. Um, you're right. I do a bunch of stuff. I have a bunch of different columns all over the place. I have a coast to coast AM style call-in show, and the conceit of the show is you call in with your phone, and the theme is something that could be interpreted in a paranormal way or about internet culture. So
That's
we
so
get calls
cool.
that are both about paranormal stuff and internet stuff.
Is this like a
Um,
Bell kind of thing?
yeah, yeah,
Hell yeah, I missed that.
yeah. Um, yeah, and I mean that's it. I'm just working on the stuff I'm always working on.
You said a few weeks ago, you said that my fiction work was giving you the urge to try and write an alt-lit novel. Is there
Yeah,
anything cooking there? Maybe
um,
early
I have
ideas?
I have some fiction on my blog, but I just like I don't you know what it is? Like I like to like fully submerge into like the fictional world that I'm building and
Yeah,
like I haven't had the time to like shield myself from the real world and like detach and get into a fictional world.
sure. It's probably hard when you're a mother to a young child as well to
Yeah.
I mean, I always think about like Virginia Woolf talking about just like how the nature of womanhood is like so against deep artistic work because you're always getting pulled away to do random shit.
Yeah. No, that's true. I will say it doesn't necessarily impede my lifestyle, but it does make it different.
Mm,
Didn't stop J.K. Rowling, you know.
that's true.
that's
Yeah,
that's true.
It's only after
that's
she stopped being a mom that things got kind of, I don't know, went off the rails.
she had
That
too much time on her hands.
that's like one of the things her sort of like becoming this like culture warrior. It's not so much like her stated beliefs that are surreal to me, but like that she stopped being known as like the Harry Potter lady and is
Yeah,
now just known as a turf. It just like it feels like we're in some kind of strange video game or a show that jumped the shark or something. It's like, well, how did you go off the you know what I mean? Like
yeah. I literally saw some like center right guy reply to her and say like, Joanne, you're right, but could you post about something else? And that made me laugh when I saw that. Yeah, I do feel a little bad for her. I mean, I guess to Steelman, you just say she found something she believes in and she's fighting for it. I don't know. It seems like it creates a lot of misery for her as well as for the people fighting
yeah.
her.
I mean, I think what's surreal to me is just like, like Stephen King tweets like, you know, Trump derangement syndrome
Yeah, yeah,
bullshit.
yeah, yeah.
Like all of these people, like I didn't need to know this side of you. I just like you needed to just be like a name to me and I didn't know what your face looked like. And I just knew you mediated by Barnes and Nobles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's what I think is like weird to me, this sort of like uh dissolution of boundaries.
I started to feel a little dirty and I realized that I just don't have the politics commentator in me. I wrote a piece about basically everybody on my Instagram stories saying they were happy that Charlie Kirk got shot and how much that creeped me out. And then immediately the Trump administration started talking about like how like saying anything bad about Republicans is hate speech and they're gonna imprison you for that. And there was just such a whiplash in like 48 hours that I
Yeah.
wrote like my like first piece and then I wrote like my second piece, which was this sort of like generic like TDS thing. And
Yeah.
after I wrote it again, I just felt dirty. I was like, the world doesn't need another anti-Trump piece. This just I feel like I'm not making the world better. I'm just sullying myself. I don't know.
No,
It's a
I know what you
difficult
mean.
relationship to manage.
It is, and it is so scary because like any direction you choose is going to piss people off, and some
Yeah.
some people just want to grill,
Yeah,
metaphorically.
and it's like they're like, "Hey man, you're just a sci-fi author. Please just be my sci-fi author and don't be all TDS." And it's like, "Oh, okay,
Yeah,
whatever."
I
Sure.
think that when I look at Trump and I look at his what made him successful as a politician, um, is he has a very and also what explains a lot of his behavior and what he does is he seems like he has a very similar like content algorithm as say like the Kardashians, where it's like say or do whatever is going to maximize the amount of attention people are paying to me in over the next new like 24, 48 hour, 7-day news cycle and
Mm,
maximize the amount of eyeballs that are and brain like waves that are allocated towards thinking about me. I don't care if it's good thoughts, negative thoughts, or in between, as long as they're thinking about me.
I
And so,
mean, he is the first Twitter president in the
yeah,
way that like JFK was a TV president, FDR was a radio president. I mean, we
it,
get presidents who are able to maximize for whatever the medium of the day is.
exactly. And if you really want to be anti-Trump, the best way to take away do that is just to like not talk about him.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you're
I
right.
guess.
If
I
they
think that we're getting close to time here. We've been going a good while, and that's just because there's so much to get into. Were there any last things, Kenny, that you wanted to touch on with Catherine before we let her go? Okay. Well, Catherine, I know you're a very busy woman, both professionally and personally. So thank you for taking the time. I'm really glad we could get you on. Needless to say, I'm a big fan, and part of the cool thing about doing this show is that you get an excuse to you know, have a conversation with someone you admire professionally in a way that might feel like a little bit of an imposition if it was just, you know, a lunch or a Zoom. So at least with the pretense of doing it for an audience, it's very indulgent for me, and I really do appreciate you taking the time. I hope the audience got something out of it as well.
Yeah, and thanks for being flexible about my reschedules.
Oh yeah, no, I get it. I've been in similar situations, and I'm sure we've got our own baby drama ahead in a couple of years, so just paying it forward or paying it whichever direction. I don't know. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. Kenny, thanks for coming along. I know this was maybe a little brain rotted for you. Kenny is like very good at logging off and doing yoga and surfing and being offline. So
I love internet culture. Thank you for being patient with me and walking me through Gamergate, etc.
yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot more to read. Maybe one day we'll have like nice hardbound compendia of all of this information, but for now it's sort of an oral tradition. So here we are participating in the oral tradition. If you would like to sponsor the Futurist Letters show, as you know, this is where your sponsor message will go. Go to futuristletters.com, click on advertise. You can support us. You can also become a paying subscriber, which I highly recommend because then you can listen to our after show where Kenny and I, or whoever my co-host is, get into how the episode went. So stick around, and that is the next episode that you will see on your feed. Until then, everybody have a wonderful day. It was lovely to have you as an audience. Catherine, thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure, and we will see you later.